Hi, welcome to the presentation, When is it time to automate in the food industry? My name is Saint-Hyacinthe. I'm the General Manager of Q Automation, and hopefully this presentation will give you a way of thinking on when is it time to automate in a business way, not necessarily in a technical way. Can you really put some icing on a cake automatically? There might be people who have robots for that. And when is it time to purchase that equipment? That's what we mean by when is it time to automate. Q Automation has been in automation since 25 years. We have four main divisions. Food and seafood is now our main business. We're the company who designed the most full food factory in Eastern Canada, east of Quebec City. We're on la Côte-Nord, Gaspésie, New Brunswick, PEI, Newfoundland, Nova Scotia. And we now do a lot more project in the United States. And we just bought a small company in Quebec to be more present in that place. So we have four divisions: food and seafood, biomass and aggregate, that's around peat moss, wood industry, and all that type of industry where we started 25 years ago. General automation, we do plastic factory, we do all sorts of metal factory, packaging, labeling in different type of industry. So Cube Automation have been there since 25 years. We're the company who do the most full factory design in Eastern Canada. We're specialized in seafood industry mainly. That's why we work from la Côte-Nord to all these provinces, because there's a lot of seafood plant all around those areas. We do export also quite a bit across Canada and around the world, and we'd like to do it more. But you have to realize we work with a lot of small organizations. We're not a larger company and only sells to the large. Most of our clients are small mom and pop company who grew to have 100, 200, 300 employees. But we also do work for the giant in Eastern Canada also. The agenda today, the evolution with automation. Where does it start? Where does it go? Basically you start in the kitchen, then perhaps you buy a bakery, and perhaps later on you get to automate your cake line, assuming you've developed a very popular type of cake. Your path to automation, once your business is growing like that, your sales are growing, when is it time to pass from the kitchen to the different step to eventually go to the full automated line? And then are you a candidate for automation? It'd be great that the product you invent goes to full automation, but maybe you'll never get there. But at different level you are, when is it time to go to the next level? This presentation will also give an insight on that also. And in conclusion, although this presentation is about an automation company, there's a big fuss about Industry 4.0 these days, and you should automate, you should put a robot everywhere. We come to the conclusion that the old classic break-even point decision is when you should automate. And when you look at your own operation, at some point you have to pass from a workstation manufacturing to the assembly line manufacturing. That concept is 100 years old and is still very important. And it's great to use 4.0, robots and everything, but when it's valuable. The evolution with automation. So we've made this little imagery of what the evolution could be. You start in your kitchen, later on you grow your sale, you go to the bakery style, and then you still have quite a bit of manual work, but you might have smarter or bigger workstation, a bigger mixer, a smarter oven. Maybe you have some intelligence on your oven. Maybe you have it on your phone, and you can tell right from your phone when your cake's about to be cooked. 5 minutes before, it gives you a little advice or a little warning. But still, it's not a production line. And eventually, if your sales still grow and grow and grow, you go to the robotized production line. This applies to beer. You might invent a beer in your garage. Later on, you set yourself in more like a store-like restaurant style, and then eventually you go in full production line. So this could apply to almost any product you want to develop. Eventually, this is where you want to go, a full automated system, very little manpower, and possibly this is how you get the lowest cost and the most consistency that you could get. The evolution of automation 4.0, if you're involved around industrial, especially if you're smaller and growing, you keep hearing about Industry 4.0, Industry 4.0. They talk about it all the time. For us at Cube Automation, connecting device on the production line, we're doing it since 20 years already, almost the full 25 years we've been in business. But for some reason, it gets popular now. So to give you to inform you what does it mean that Industry 4.0, you go to history in around the 1800s. The human have invented motors, whether it's water powered, steam powered, or other type of powered engine. All of a sudden, the human being in their production of things have extended their strength. The strength got bigger. They were able to make stuff that was harder to make because of motor help. Later on, in the 1900s, there's another concept that made us more productive. It's the automated line, associated with Ford, where they came out with their Ford T model, and Ford was known to say you can have it the color you want as long as it's black. So at that point, when you organize a production line, you might not be automated, you might not have those gizmos and robots and all that fancy stuff, but you do gain a lot of productivity if you get volume, but at the same time, you will lose a little bit of flexibility. But it's part of the decision of automating. In 1970, that's when the computer was becoming more mainstream, at least for business. That's when production line started to see digital control. In 1970, compared to the 1800, where it was the extent of the strength, now you start to have the extension of the human mind taking decision on a production line. That's what you have in 1970. And what's going on now, Industry 4.0? Well, all that processing power has increased. We now have very intelligent video recognition, robots, fancy algorithm, process control that it can take, a chemical calculation and optimized process. Everything is interconnected, and that's what we call Industry 4.0. Like I've mentioned, for us at Cube Automation, we work in that field since 20 years. It doesn't look new to us. Who is it new to? It's new to the general public. So to take the historical chart I just made and compare it to that diagram, when you're in the kitchen, it's product development. There's almost no technology than the stuff you already have, mostly. When you get into the bakery, you get better tooling, bigger. Sometimes you have some of the product you do is more or less in an assembly line. If you're making pizza, you might not have automation, but all your steps are well organized on the line, and there's a step for the dough, a step for the sauce, a step for the ingredients, and a step for the cheese, and you have it in the line. That's more or less referred to as Industry 1.0, Industry 2.0. Eventually, when you go in the production line, you start to see controllers and you start to see full intelligence. You might have a stove in your bakery that's already Industry 4.0 connected to your phone, but those are general rules. And now, why is Industry 4.0 becoming a buzzword? It's more or less because the general public now, for them, it's new. Now you can have your stove connected to your phone. You can have your dishwasher connected to your phone. I do have at home a crock pot similar to that, where I can put something for a slow cooker for 8 hours. And if my kids go in the house and open the lid in the mid-afternoon and they don't put it back, I get a warning on my phone while I'm at work. And I can call home or text someone home and say, listen, put the lid back because the recipe will be screwed up. So this is called Internet of Things. This is new. For me, Industry 4.0 is not new because I'm in that field. So with Internet of Things becoming popular, mainly because the price of those components is going down while the power is going up, that's why there's a lot of fuss around Industry 4.0 coming from the general public rather than from the industrial world. At Cube Automation, we have a tool to gather all that stuff, and we call it the Smart Factory equals Industry 4.0. Now, what is your path to automation? Where and when? Where do you start? When do you move up? Well, you do a product development. This is just an example. This lady in the video is making some sort of roll. There's a lot of roll. She's going to the Saturday morning market. She starts. Hopefully, she sells those rolls like crazy, and eventually she'll want to do more. She'll buy a bakery. She'll sell even more, and then she'll come to the full production line. And then what you see on your right is some sort of device to be able to fill some 4 bottles at a time. And usually at this point, you have almost no automation, but sometimes you have a few devices to try to make you more efficient. You're starting to think about gaining efficiency. The assembly line style, when should you change? Well, at that point, it's just your process that change. And I'll show you in the next slide about the Founder movie from McDonald's. And there's about 15 minutes at the beginning of that movie that's so great. It talks about the McDonald brother on how they look at what they were selling. And they saw that about 87% of what they were selling were mainly the same product, the hamburger, the fries, and the pop. So then they decide to reorganize the kitchen and make it in a way that those items would be delivered extremely quick. And if you look at that movie, it's 30 seconds that it could, you order within 30 seconds, you're served. So if you focus on certain product and you sell a lot, you need your production line. And like I've said, this is a great movie. You just have to look from about the 12th minute to the 25th minute on Netflix. You don't have to look at the whole movie, but if you look at the beginning where Ray Kroc realized that this is a very well organized restaurant. He sells milkshake machine. He goes in many restaurants. It's long before you receive your order. There's often mistakes. It takes maybe 30 minutes, and then he go to that store to sell them milkshake machine, and he realized that they deliver in 30 seconds. He can't believe it, and that's when he say, we have to franchise that system. But while he realized it, he asked the McDonald brother to explain them how they get there. And this is, in a sense, what Cube Automation does for their client when they say, listen, we've reached a certain point with our factory. We started with not much. Even today, I got a call from a guy who set a production line in a container. Now he's selling more and more. Now he needs to go to the next step. What should he do? And he's more or less a guy who's at step 2 and he needs to go to step 3. But the concept, how we're going to analyze that factory, is very similar to what is explained in that movie. So at that stage, very often, if you increase your sales, you want better tooling, like a ketchup dispensing device to have a product that's very consistent, always the same amount of ketchup. Here you have a bottling system to bottle more efficiently, 4 bottles at a time, and with a consistent amount of beer all the time. It might be a simple mixer where the mixer is mixing larger quantities so that you're more efficient. Or it might be just a better organized counter. But initially, that's where it is between the tooling and the assembly line. It could be slightly more than just little organization. You might be building a cake line and you might have some conveyors, but still it's not highly automated. Or you might have a few workstations that are just smarter. For example, if you're bottling, you might have just a labeling station automated, but all the rest might be mainly manual. So, but the important here at that step is when you pass from working in a kitchen style workstation to a production line, and the idea is that it's when people start to do their own step. So in the kitchen, you do all the steps. One person does all the steps. In the assembly line, every person usually do a small step of the process, but they're very specialized into it. You can create better workstation, and they can be very quick doing it. So once you move up again, Then you get to a semi-automated production line, and between the semi-automated production line and the fully automated production line, at this point, you already have some serious automation. You already have Industry 2.0, 4.0. You need intelligence. It's not only electronics here. If you look at the sandwich dispensing of the sauce, it's all technology, mechanically even. How do you control the amount of sauce you put all the time to be consistent? If you look at the cake that you see there, it's not too hard, but it's not either that easy to make that little flour in the cake all the time the same way. And if I take the beer bottling people, at some point you might have some little tank in your basement or in your garage or in your shed. At some point you need a fully controlled system to get more volume, and at some point you need a bottling line. So those people are mostly at this step automated, and a lot of people will never go more than that, and they won't need to go more than that. But eventually you'll get to, for example, that we have here in New Brunswick, we get to the point where like Mo said, if you ever walked in there at a tour recently with Derek Holland, the president of Moosehead, and this is like automated as you can imagine. There's almost no one producing millions and millions of bottles in a day. So why automate? You know, ask yourself why. I hear people sometimes saying, I want to stay small. I don't want to go bigger. But some people would like to go bigger, but they can't. The way they're organized, they'll never be able to produce more volume. They say, I can't find the right people. Well, if you need very smart people, all the way of your operation will be hard to grow. If you divide it in simpler steps, it's easier to grow. So why would you automate? It's basically financial growth. At the end of the day, it's a business. You're selling a product at a price, you're doing a margin. If you can do it more often, you'll make more money. And it's not easy to put a nice product on the market, but if you do get traction, just grab as much traction as you can and try to make it grow. As soon as you'll go from very small to medium to start to go large, initially you could be popular in a local market. You can be popular because you're local in some local grocery, but eventually you'll need to be more competitive and lower your costs. It's pretty rare that you can operate at a larger scale with a high cost of production. So how do you grow automation? Well, the different thing it will do, it'll create a reduction of labor, it will increase your volume, product uniformity. If you have a system that always put the same amount of mayonnaise on a sandwich, people will buy your product in any convenience store, anywhere. They know what it is. It will be always consistent. It will not depend on the humor of the person who's putting mayonnaise that day. You'll get recipe consistency. Sometimes it's the way you mix your recipe. We can make systems that will put all the ingredients automatically, and while those ingredients are being put in your recipe, you're sure it's always the same recipe. I see a lot of people, they work on it with paper. It should be 3 cups of this, 2 cups of that. Sometimes they mix it up. They find it later on. So automation can do that. The other thing that automation can do is simplification or standardization of tasks so that you can grow without those all complicated skills. Or at least if you still need some fancy skills, it'll be isolated to a few workstations, and all the other, it'll be easier to find people to do that stuff. It's also a reduction of paperwork. That's Industry 4.0 now. You can grab a lot of data like weight, labeling. A lot of data can be grabbed automatically, put in the database, and create the report for you. Because as soon as you grow, and the food safety standards are not disappearing. If something, they'll get worse and worse and worse. More paperwork. So as soon as you get bigger, I was talking last weekend to some farmers who are doing product like jam, and they're scared to go into the size that they need labeling. Well, it's a blockage, but now it's easier and easier to do. Automation can also reduce your labor force skills, like I mentioned before, create less mistake, and at a higher level, it's energy saving and also better quality control. So what's your sequence of growth? Usually, you start in your kitchen and you just buy yourself better tool. As soon as you'll get more work, you'll do a better workstation. And then that's when I see some people who are blocked. You come to a point you feel you can't do more. It's because you have to rethink your process. When you have to go from a one person does it all type of operation and you're moving to the production line, a lot of people are blocked there. And it's not automation, it's not that complex. Listen to the founder movie for 15 minutes. There's other video online that show you how to organize your line, but this is one major step to be done. After that, you have a better assembly line. Once you have a better assembly line, you start to probably buy with more volume certain better workstation. For example, in the balling, you might be adding a labeling machine. You might be adding some sort of mixing machine, and you're automating some part of the process. Then at some point you feel blocked again, and that's when you have to rethink your whole process again. And you might keep the same assembly line with more automation, or you might realize it's time to reorganize again, and then you get to the fully automated line. Later on, if you're still extremely successful, you might need to get into specialized automation very specific to your own need. The picture we've seen earlier with the system putting the flour in the cake, you might have something in your process that's unique to you. It has to be developed for you. And that's interesting because in Eastern Canada, there's all sorts of help and research center that can help you to do that. So example of better tool to increase productivity. In the McDonald's video, it was simply a machine to make a 4 milkshake at the same time, or a larger mixer. The dispenser, I've talked about it earlier, and the bottle also. To rethink your process flows, I love one statement in the movie: symphony of movement instead of waste of motion. One of the McDonald brothers says, we went from a bunch of waste of motion to a symphony of movement, and that's your goal when you redo your line. Ford Model T principle still applies today. And these are examples of better workstation. If you look at the subway, the way it is, the way it's set up, you take a student who arrives there, and after the first day can almost work alone already in there. You have the bread, you have the meat, you have the vegetable, you have the sauce, you have the counter. And if you're working alone in there because it's the middle of the afternoon, it's still a good production line. I give that example because it could be your own new assembling line when you're in a low season. When it gets very busy at lunchtime at the subway, it's very easy to go up to 5 people, and it's very well organized for all those 5 people, and yet they can go and put a lot of volume through easily, and it's easy for everyone. That's what is the symphony of movement example is. That's what you're looking for to set yourself up. So I've just added a few other pictures of a simpler sandwich counter and then a cake line. And then you get in the more fancy stuff. You see on top it's an image of an oyster machine where in those places to grade oyster by size, we use vision system, and where there was 8 to 10 people working for a full day, you can have like 3 people working a full day, and then you're saving per oysters, but then it's even more than that. You're much more consistent in your count and your size. You have the sandwich line for automation, the robot system, and then at the end, your whole goal is to get to a fully automated line, and you see again the Moosehead line, and then you see a cake line. Are you a good candidate for automation? Well, the idea is to plan your sale. If you could predict your sale, we could tell you exactly the line you need. And we can tell you when it's time to change your line. So do you plan to sell a large volume of similar product? That's easier to automate. Do you have repetitive, simple tasks? That's easier to automate. Do you have product family that are similar? So sometimes it's not the same product, but that's also easier to automate. If you have a high labor value per unit cost or a mountain of paperwork, those are good candidates for automation. High product variety is not good candidate for automation. So when should you invest in automation? Well, it's the old break-even point principle. I mean, if you have a machine, an oyster machine, you had 10 people working, you bring it down to 3, obviously you have a saving. You know, if you spend $300,000 on a robot, how much money should you save in 1 year? $900,000? That's actually very great. $300,000, that means the robot paid itself in a year. $100,000, it pays in 3 years. $330,000, well, it takes 10 years to pay. I would say financially, for financial reason only, ABC, A is extraordinary. I almost never see that. B is a home run. C is typical. 3 to 5 years is typical. Some will buy some automation just to have a better palette. Be very careful to take those decisions because make sure you have financial value for those type of decisions. So there's no absolutely right answer, but usually it's between C and B that it lies in terms of value to your organization. So in summary, Industry 2.0 is still an amazing tool 1 year later. Industry 4.0 is very useful in the right circumstances. Tell us your 3 to 5 years sales prediction and we'll design your perfect line. Include plans to increase sales of repetitive product. Has nothing to do with technology, but more that you'll do the same product, easier is it to automate. With sales prediction, it's not necessarily automation. We can design your perfect line. Identify repetitive tasks, plan and know when to integrate automation. Prepare and innovate now toward where you're going, especially if you feel that sales will continue to grow. Conclusion, automation can seriously decrease labor. There are a lot of benefit to manufacturing 4.0. At the end, it's an old classic return on investment decision. Deal with people who are experienced with automation because then your expectations are realistic. If someone tells you you spend $100,000 on a project, but at the end it's a $250,000 project, all your calculations are wrong. So you need experienced people to know how much it would cost. A lot of what they call new technology is not new technology. We're doing it since 25 years. It's new to the food manufacturer, but for us, we know it since a long time, or people like us know it since a long time. Look at it seriously, but don't fall in love with the hype tribe. It's not because it's Industry 4.0 that it's necessarily good for you. It has to be a good business decision. So hopefully this presentation was nice to you and useful for your future business. And if you have any question, do not hesitate to ask.